Hello friends, the government of India is going to use new fiscal anchor in the name of debt to GDP ratio from this year. Means from 1st April 2026, this new fiscal anchor will be implemented. So it becomes utmost important for UPSC aspirants. So first of all, what are fiscal anchors? Fiscal anchors are fiscal targets like a particular level of fiscal deficit to be achieved, a particular level of revenue deficit to be achieved. Similarly, a particular level of debt to GDP ratio is to be achieved. So when you make such kind of targets, they are technically called as fiscal anchors. So anybody is to understand what's the need of fiscal anchors. Because of fiscal anchors, a fiscal policy of any country becomes disciplined, rule based. So this is the basic purpose behind introduction of fiscal anchors. And there is a paradigm shift in India's fiscal policy from this year onwards. And Honorable Finance Minister in her budget speech last year already clarified that from next year, means from 2026-27, this new fiscal anchor would be started. So last year only she announced this. So if we go by her statement, then we can expect that from 1st April 2026, we would be in a new regime of debt to GDP ratio. So right at that time, she mentioned certain goals. So let us see what are these goals. So targets are something like this. So for 2025-26, Madam Finance Minister set this goal of debt to GDP ratio. And anybody who is not able to understand this debt to GDP ratio, I am explaining it. So you are to see total liabilities of the government of India, and you should find out what is the monetary value, numerical value, and next you are to see what is the size of your GDP in monetary terms. So if you express total liabilities of the government of India as a percentage of GDP, then this is called debt to GDP ratio. So this was the goal set in this year's budget, and at the time of this year's budget presentation, our level of debt to GDP ratio was 57.1%, because the budget for this year was presented in this year. So at that time, this was the level of debt to GDP ratio in our country, and for 1 year we thought that we would be able to reduce a debt to GDP ratio by 1 percentage points. So this was the goal for this year. Now for this year, this is the terminal year, and by the end of this year, we want to achieve this goal 50% plus 1% and also minus 1%, right? 50% plus minus 1%. So if you go by this mathematics, the thing would be what, like 51% at the higher end and 49% at the lower end. So the government is going to get flexibility of 2% here. So it is said that this kind of flexibility would be making government comfortable with counter-cyclical fiscal policies to be made during recession. And as an UPSC aspirant, you must be aware about counter-cyclical policies. During recession, counter-cyclical fiscal policy would mean what? Like government expenditure is to be increased, like expansionary fiscal policy is to be used, or tax cuts are to be introduced. So this would increase market borrowings. Why? Because there would be higher deficit if you go for more of government expenditure, less of tax collection. So your debt will be expanding during recession. But since there is a flexibility here, the government can increase debt to GDP ratio up to 51%, right? So this kind of goal setting is providing flexibility in making counter-cyclical fiscal policies. So this is how you have to understand it. Next, we have to look at a committee's recommendations, and this committee is called FRBM Review Committee, which was chaired by Honorable N.K. Singh sir. So, what are the guidelines given by this committee? So, according to FRBM Review Committee chaired by Honorable N.K. Singh sir, general government debt to GDP ratio shouldn't exceed 60%, they said. So what is the meaning of general government? General government consists of both governments, center and state. So center and state taken together, their debt to GDP ratio shouldn't exceed 60%. Individually also, the committee set the goals. For the center, maximum limit which committee prescribed was 40%, and for the states 20%. So you can compare FRBM review committees, guidelines with the goal set by the government, right, regarding debt to GDP ratio. So this is how you can analyze this concept of debt to GDP ratio. I think that this discussion will be quite useful for all people who are planning to sit in UPSC examination this year or next year. Thank you very much.